What's going on, guys? This is Top Ramen Shaman, back with a brand new mic, a brand new pop filter, and all the clarity to warm your soul and seduce your ears with the voice of a black angel. Yeah. And I want to welcome you to the third and very, very long due installment of Shugoki Match-Ups 101. And today, we're going to be covering the samurai. So as always, sit back, relax, grab a bowl of ramen, and enjoy. Alright, let's kick off this fun-filled adventure with the vanguard of the samurai faction, the good old-fashioned Kensei. So let's go ahead and take a look at the list of pros and cons to learn about this matchup in more depth. Alright, when fighting the Kensei, there are three seemingly simple, yet very important factors that make him strong that you need to focus on, and that's top stance domination, his feint heavy mix-up game, and guard break spam. If you pay attention to your opponent, you'll notice that majority of Ken players keep their stance direction aimed at the top. Now this may seem strange for a character with such excellent mix-up potential, but the reason they do this is to take advantage of their lightning fast footsie game. Kensei is at home when aiming up, because they can easily smack you with light attacks or heavy cancel into lights to quickly break your hyper armor and keep you from getting in on them. To counter this, I recommend simply blocking top and initially focusing on defense for a brief moment to feel out your enemy's tactics while slowly initiating them, allowing you to gain the close quarters advantage that you need to succeed. Now if a player notices you defending top, they'll most likely begin to attempt side lights to throw you off, especially from range, due to the fact that it has a long reach and a quick attack speed. Use this knowledge to your advantage and prepare yourself to flick parry these attempts, as it's easy to parry and allows a quick and reliable punish. Now when you are in a close quarters situation, I recommend starting your light to heavy combos off to the side while your opponent is focused on guarding top, thus giving you a bit of a better chance at landing the hit and also forcing your opponent out of their comfort zone. Though most Kensei players are extremely passive, don't think that you're safe when you're up in a Kensei's face, because the threat is far from gone due to Kensei's extremely versatile mix-up game. By now, I'm sure we all understand Kensei's basic mix-ups, but the one I see players use the most by far is his dash top light into top unblockable, which is then dash cancelled into a guard break, which is then followed up by a heavy swing. Now this may sound a little bit confusing, so let me demonstrate what I'm talking about. This is an absolutely deadly mix-up that confuses many players, and the goal is to get as many fake-out feints to guard breaks as possible. If your opponent realizes that you are reversing their grab attempts, 9 out of 10 times they'll begin to spam Kensei's vacuum guard breaks to try and throw you off, but like any Vanguard matchup, the counters are simple. In this case, you can throw out a light attack after you've reversed the first GB to cancel their repeated follow-up attempts, which should cause them to stop their silly spam extravaganza. One important tip to keep in mind is that if you are being GB spammed, keep a close eye out, because Kensei, like Shugoki, has a really bad case of T-Rex arms and can sometimes whiff a guard break, giving you ample time to punish him. Overall, when fighting Kensei, you need to realize most of the fight is going to be a staring contest with top lights, feints, and guard breaks, so you should heavily focus on shutting down his top stance control with aggression and mix-ups. Be sure to utilize hyper armor and trades to shut down combo attempts, and always be ready to shut down and punish his repeated guard break attempt. Combining all of this together will truly shut down a Ken player, because they honestly don't have much else that they can do. Alright, so moving on to the next character on the list, we're going to cover our own character of choice, the famous fat man himself, Papago. So once again, let's jump right into the list of pros and cons to learn about the nuances of this matchup in a little more depth. Alright guys, I hate to burst your bubble. I'm sure you were expecting to hear of a battle of epic proportions, fat colliding with fat, spike clubs ripping flesh and smashing bone, just a battle of two titans. But to be honest, this has got to be the dumbest matchup in For Honor. Now I'm not gonna lie, I lose like 50% of my Shug versus Shug matchups, so go ahead and call me biased if you'd like, and that's okay. But there's just something about a Shugoki mirror match that is not fun to me whatsoever. Now, personal feelings aside, I'm not going to spend too much time covering this matchup due to the fact that it's all fairly simplistic in its approach. When fighting another Shug player, it all boils down to the basic mechanics of light attack trades, stamina management, and managing not only your own hyper armor, but your opponent's as well. In this matchup, the passive player willing to do nothing but parry and counter is usually the one who wins. Hyper armor management is everything in this fight. When you break their hyper armor, you're given a much better chance to lay on some pressure without worrying about trades. But you still have to be mindful of your opponent parrying your swings, so you need to carefully apply aggression. After the various patches, they added a mechanic where you can actually sumo hug another Shugoki player while their armor is still active. So now actually trading a hug while getting hit by a light or heavy blow can be a viable option, but I would still recommend throwing your opponent against the wall for a guaranteed hug. But I mean, it's all about how risky you feel that day. When fighting another Shug, I personally like to keep my guard stance on the opposite side of theirs because it coaxes them into a false sense of security, and like clockwork, they always seem to simply light attack in the direction that they're standing in, so it makes for easy flick parries and punishes. Overall guys, there's no need to complicate things. Trade lights and heavies until someone dies, because trying to utilize tricky feints usually just gets you punished. If you want to be a MLG tryhard, just sit there and do nothing but play passive and parry into guard breaks, sumo hug, rinse and repeat. So, yeah. Shugoki fights. Voila. So here we go, rounding up to the end of the roster. Up next is a character I hear a lot of complaints about, and that's the one and only Orochi. So let's go ahead and jump right into the list of pros and cons to learn about this simple yet deadly character in more depth. Okay, so I'm here to tell you that once you learn how most Orochi players think, this matchup is really not bad at all. When fighting an Orochi, you have to respect what they can do. An Orochi's kinda like a chihuahua. He growls and you think, aw, how cute. He can't do anything. He has no moves. And right when you get too cocky, he snatches yo ass up in the blink of an eye, and the next thing you know, you're already dead and on to the next round. As I'm sure you know, Orochi's playstyle is based off only a couple core moves, and that's his top lights, his zone attack, and that annoying ass Storm Rush cancel spam that everybody can't stand. Now you have to realize that like Berserker, Orochi has no initiation except for his please parry me daddy / light. Because of this, most Orochi players are fairly passive, and they're gonna wait for you to initiate first. Use this to your advantage by utilizing Shugoki's running heavy attack. This move is absolutely fantastic due to the fact that it does great damage if it lands, but its main use is to bait out obvious top light counterattacks. Because Papagoki is so big and lumbering, most people think his recovery is ungodly slow. But on the contrary, monsieur, it's actually pretty fast. Whether you use a running heavy or a light into heavy, players will think that they can punish your recovery frames, but they don't realize that you can recover so fast you can literally parry the first swing of their top light initiation. This is what I base my fighting style around when fighting Orochi. I get in close, utilize light into heavy feint combos, and I try to parry every single solitary top light that comes my way. If you successfully pull this off, I guarantee you that your opponent will completely shut down because you just took away their core damage dealing attack. Now let's talk about if you're the one on the ropes and your armor is down, because at one point or another it's bound to happen. When your armor's down, that's an Orochi's prime time to pressure you as hard as he possibly can, so you have to channel your inner Mayweather and learn how to strategically fight backing up and moving around. Take this time under pressure to slow down, breathe, take a nice deep woosah, and watch your opponent's movement. We already know that they're gonna be the aggressor, and we know they're ready to burn a lot of stamina to do so. So let's turn this into our advantage. First, keep your guard stance up to avoid any top light spam because that's what's gonna pump out the most damage. At this point, they're left with a couple reliable options, side lights, zones, and of course guard breaks. Your opponent knows he cannot penetrate your defense from the top, so all he sees is side attacks, that's it. Use this to your advantage and wait for the perfect time to smack his old punk ass upside the head with a top light into headbutt. The stamina drain alone is usually enough to get a player to back off, and that's all we need to regain our armor and our composure. Overall, I personally play more of a balanced fighting style against Orochi, focusing heavily on parry baits, close range mix-ups, and zoning to read my opponent. Just remember that like Shugoki, Orochis really have nothing else other than a few core moves in his arsenal, and once you perfect your defense against these moves, I promise you, any Orochi main might as well give up against you. And last but not least on the list, my friends, is the masked menace herself, the Nabushi. So for the last time, let's go ahead and take a look at the list of pros and cons to learn about this long-ranged, zoning-based character in more depth. So looking at the tools the Nabushi is able to utilize, it's clear that we're at a bit of a disadvantage. She has a clear range advantage, great bleed attacks, great damage, and speed. And, not to mention, she has a fantastic mix-up game. Similar to fighting Kensei, your goal is to get right up in their face and apply constant pressure with mix-ups, parries, and trades. At the beginning of the match, you have a few options at your disposal. You can either run straight in with a running heavy or an Oni charge just to close the gap, letting your armor absorb any punishment. Or you can stand back and let your opponent come to you by using their weak initiation to your advantage. Like Orochi, the Nabushi only has a few initiations. She can either forward dash into a zone if she wants to be tricky, or she can perform a basic bitch forward dash light that always comes from the top. If you decide to let your opponent initiate, I recommend keeping your guard stance left or right like I taught you in episode 2 when fighting Valks and Zerkers, to entice your opponent to perform a top lunge attack, leading to a very easy parry. Once you have successfully broken the barrier between you and your opponent, it's important not to back down. Stay relentless in your pursuit, and rely on fast-paced mix-ups and close-range defense to score a victory. When defending against Nabushi, I tend to keep my guard stance direction to the left, just to avoid her extremely damaging zone attack. Now obviously this isn't me saying, hey, only block left. I'm just saying make a conscious effort to ensure it's always well defended. A Nabushi under pressure is her biggest weakness. Remember how I said she has a great mix-up game? Yes, that is an advantage, but it can also be a disadvantage. The Nobushi is like a dancer of death, alright? But, like a real life dancer, most of her moves are fairly choreographed. If she dashes left, you know the follow-up light will always come from the left. If she dashes forward, it's coming from the top, so on and so forth. So for the most part, all of Nobushi's moves come from one preset direction when being performed, except her side dash heavies, which always come out from the opposite side that she dashed. So I recommend going into practice mode and using Nobushi, study her moves, and use visual cues to prepare parries and counters. Another thing I want to talk about is Nobushi's grabs and kicks. Now, her guard breaks are by far some of the most punishing in the game because they lead to a devastating free top heavy afterwards. After the top heavy lands, your opponent's granted their own personal little mix-up game that you have to be aware of. They can either perform another heavy, which is then feinted into another guard break. They can let the heavy fly. They can dash into a myriad of follow-up attacks. Or they can perform her kick, which can be used immediately or stalled. After a successful grab, I personally tend to always watch for the second fake-out guard break, but if they do decide to perform a kick into light combo, it can be easily dodged and punished with a light and a headbutt to drain most, if not all, of their stamina, leaving them wide open for severe punishment. Be warned though, an experienced Nobushi player can bait a parry by kicking and not following it up with a light. In doing so, the recovery frames are just short enough to parry you and turn the tables, so do use this with caution depending on who you fight. Overall, when fighting a Nobushi, your goal is to get in as close as possible and utilize smart yet fast-paced pressure tactics to get your enemy in an uncomfortable circumstance. Utilize your armor to absorb initial hits and quickly shut down combos before they begin. And be sure to study the Nobushi's movements, because remember, though she has great combo potential, her moves can be very predictable. With all of this knowledge and enough practice, you should be on your way to taking on every single samurai in the game with a newfound sense of courage and determination, thus making you the ultimate killing machine. So, that's all I've got for today. I had honestly planned on ending Shugoki Match-Ups 101 right here, but I've had a ton of requests to do Shugoki vs DLC characters, so that will be on the way very soon. Anyway, I hope you guys learned something new. If you think I missed anything, be sure to let us know down in the comment section below so we can all learn and grow from one another. If you'd like to subscribe, we have a kind and amazing community willing to accept anyone new with open arms, so please don't be afraid. As always, my friends, I want to thank you guys so much for watching. God bless, and I'll see you next time.